Thank you all for joining us today. Before we start with the event, I would like to remind everyone that free speech and academic freedom are foundational values of the University of California, and for that, I will be reading a civility statement. UC Berkeley is committed to the belief that speech we may not like or agree with should be confronted with more speech, not censorship. Some of you may disagree with today's topic or have other differences with our invited guest speaker. However, please respect the spirit of this forum and the rest of the audience by allowing our guests to speak. Please do not stand, shout, or engage in any other behavior that disrupts the event or prevents the speaker from being heard. Anyone who disrupts this event may be asked to leave the campus, and if police action is necessary, this could lead to criminal citation or even arrest. Students or campus affiliates might also face administrative consequences for their behavior. There will be time for questions after Mr. Abdullah finishes speaking. It will first be a 30-minute question and answer session moderated by Mr. Abdullah and me, followed by a 30-minute question and answer session for the audience. We ask that you remain in your seats, and the event is being moderated and video recorded and will be available at the IIS website. I would now like to invite Akash Palotia to introduce our speaker for this event.
Thanks, Harshal. Charismatic, articulate, and an ardent fan of technology, Mr. Omar Abdullah is an Indian politician and this year of one of the most prominent political families of Jammu and Kashmir, the Abdullah family. He served as the youngest Chief Minister of the state of Jammu and Kashmir from 2009 to 2014. He's currently the leader of opposition in the J&K Legislative Assembly. He became a Member of Parliament at the young age of 28, a Union Minister by the age of 29, and a Chief Minister by 39, and truly inspires young politicians in India. His broad set of experiences put him in a unique position to talk about possible solutions to the Kashmir issue, the India and Pakistan relationship, and the overall Indian political scenario. We're really excited to have Mr. Abdullah among us, and I would now like to invite him to the podium to address the audience. Thank you.
Well, hi, good evening everybody. Let me begin by saying what an honor and a privilege it is for me to be here. This is the first time I had the opportunity to visit the west coast of the United States, and for that opportunity to have come from UC Berkeley is doubly rewarding. I've been asked to speak on the path forward in Kashmir, and I know that the bulk of this evening's session is actually going to be a Q&A session, so I'll try and keep my opening remarks as short as possible. But before we talk about the path forward in Kashmir, I think it's important to understand how we reached where we have done in Kashmir today. And I'm not going to go too far back. I will start from 1947. The birth of India and Pakistan, and the true point at which the problem in Jammu and Kashmir began. Now, Jammu and Kashmir has at various points in time been called various things. Traditionally, we like to know it as heaven on earth, but subsequent to that, it has been called the most dangerous place in the world, one of the last nuclear flashpoints in the world, one of the most highly militarized zones in the world, etc., etc. And all of these things at various points in time have been true. The problem in Jammu and Kashmir emerged out of the independence movement and out of the birth of Pakistan. At that point in time, if you will remember, India was made up of a number of princely states. The princely states were then asked to opt between choosing to go with India or choosing to go with Pakistan. There were three states in what is now Indian territory which opted to go with Pakistan. They were Junagadh, Hyderabad and Jammu and Kashmir for two different reasons. Junagadh and Hyderabad were Hindu majority population with Muslim leaders, and the Muslim leadership of its own took the decision that they would go with Pakistan. Jammu and Kashmir was the reverse. It was a Muslim majority state with a Hindu ruler. At that point in time, Junagadh and Hyderabad were dealt with as they were, became a part of the Indian Union, no problem subsequently. Jammu and Kashmir, the Maharaja, as I understand it, was more interested in an independent Jammu and Kashmir. He asked for time to decide and did not opt either for India or for Pakistan. So on the night of the 14th, 15th of August 1947, when India attained independence and Pakistan was born, actually a third independent domain came into existence, and that was Jammu and Kashmir. It remained independent for a few months, but it was a short-lived period. A tribal invasion from across the border, in a sense, forced the Maharaja's hand. He wanted help from India to repel that invasion. India at that time rightly said that, look, you are an independent entity. Our forces have no right to come to your rescue. The only way the Indian army can rescue the state of Jammu and Kashmir is if Jammu and Kashmir accedes to the Union of India, which is what happened. An instrument of accession was signed. Jammu and Kashmir became a part of the Union. The Indian army moved in, pushed back the rebels to a certain point, and that, for the moment, was that. Jammu and Kashmir was subsequently taken up as an issue in the United Nations, to the Security Council. The United Nations Security Council resolution that is often talked about to this day, Resolution 47 of 1948 of the United Nations Security Council, came into existence, which basically said that the people of Jammu and Kashmir would be given a right to choose which dominion they would like to be a part of, India or Pakistan. But it gets a little more complicated than that, because this Security Council resolution laid down a certain series of steps which had to be followed for that plebiscite to be granted to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. First and foremost in that was that Pakistan would withdraw its forces from the territorial boundaries of Jammu and Kashmir, withdraw in total, not downsize, downscale, or reduce, withdraw. Subsequent, and it's not, the language isn't vague. It's not as if the two steps have to take place simultaneously. It's clear that there is a step 1, step 2, step 3. So step 1 is a withdrawal by Pakistan. Step 2 is a downsizing by India of its troop levels to a level that is deemed appropriate to manage the plebiscite. And step 3 would then be the constitution of a plebiscite authority to carry out the plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, as we all know, step 1 never happened. And because step 1 never happened, clearly Government of India didn't downsize its troop presence, as a result of which the plebiscite that was to allow the people of Jammu and Kashmir to decide between India and Pakistan never happened. And that's one of the reasons why we are where we are today. Now,
please wait till a question.
I'm sure this will come up in the course of the questions, but a few years ago, one of the now former United Nations Secretary Generals, in fact visiting Delhi, said that much water has flown under the bridge now, and perhaps these United Nations Security Council resolutions are no longer relevant to Jammu and Kashmir and no longer applicable. Now, that's a point on which I'm sure a lot of us will have to agree to disagree, but that is the way it is right now. So subsequent to Jammu and Kashmir becoming a part of India, it became a divided state because the occupation of Pakistani forces was not pushed back to the point at which Jammu and Kashmir had existed in August of 1947. For Pakistan, Jammu and Kashmir has been the unfinished agenda of partition. They, for reasons that I can understand, couldn't understand why a Muslim majority state would opt to stay with India as opposed to being a part of Pakistan. Numerous wars have been fought. The dates are all there in front of you. We have a number of international agreements between India and Pakistan, dialogues and discussions, whether in Tashkent and Simla, in various other places, aimed at resolving the international dimension to the problem in Jammu and Kashmir, because there are clearly two dimensions. It's not simply a matter between New Delhi and Jammu and Kashmir, nor is it a matter between Islamabad and Jammu and Kashmir. A part of the state continues to remain with Pakistan. I belong to the part of the state that is with India, that acceded to India. And so when we come to the way forward, both these dimensions of the problem will have to be tackled. You will have to look at the situation between India and Pakistan, particularly with regard to Jammu and Kashmir, but also you'll have to look at the internal dimension to the problem in Jammu and Kashmir. When Jammu and Kashmir acceded to the Union of India, unlike other states, it negotiated the terms for its accession. And therefore, when I make the point that other states acceded and then merged with the Union of India, Jammu and Kashmir didn't. Jammu and Kashmir acceded to the Union of India, but didn't merge in toto into the Union. And which is why Jammu and Kashmir enjoys a position that is distinct from other states within the Indian Union. We are the only state with our own flag, we are the only state with our own constitution, and we are the only state for whom laws that are passed by the parliament in New Delhi do not automatically apply to the state of Jammu and Kashmir unless the state government ratifies those laws for extension to Jammu and Kashmir. Now when the state acceded and those terms were being finalized, the Union of India was responsible only for four things: currency, communication, defense, and foreign affairs. That was it. Everything else was the domain of the state, which meant that the Supreme Court of India, the Controller and Auditor General of India, the Election Commission of India, the Indian Administrative Services, the Indian Police Services, etc., none of them had jurisdiction over the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, from that day to this day, that autonomous position of Jammu and Kashmir has been significantly whittled down, wherein it is really only a pale shadow of what it used to look like. And that is one of the reasons why we are facing the problem that we are in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, clearly, the biggest problem we have in Jammu and Kashmir is the security situation. The fact that almost 30 years later, we are still dealing with an uprising, we're still dealing with militancy, we're still dealing with terrorism. It started as a purely indigenous uprising, a purely indigenous struggle for a political settlement to the problem of Jammu and Kashmir. It has since then changed and converted into a mixed struggle. It is no longer an indigenous Kashmiri uprising. Yes, the bulk of the people fighting in Kashmir continue to be from Kashmir, but at last count, if my memory serves me correctly, we've had about 16 or 18 different nationalities of people caught or killed in Jammu and Kashmir. So of course you've had Kashmiris, you've had people from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Chechnya, Sudan, the United Kingdom, and a few other countries that I wouldn't list out here. Also, what started as a purely indigenous struggle for the political rights of the Kashmiris has now also been has elements of a religious struggle now introduced into it, which is why for the first time now, while you've had, as I mentioned, all these nationalities of fighters fighting in Jammu and Kashmir, even though India has the second largest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia, you didn't find Muslims from the rest of India coming to Jammu and Kashmir and participating in the militancy there. It is only a recent phenomenon that you had in just the last few weeks. Two Indian Muslims, one from Telangana who died in an encounter, and one reportedly from Assam who's active in the outskirts of Srinagar, that have come to Jammu and Kashmir, that have become part of the militant uprising, not because of the political struggle that is going on there, but because of an identity identification of themselves as part of the Muslim struggle that needs to be waged. And that is a very significant change that has taken place, and one that I believe has grave implications for the state as a whole. Now, what gave rise to this militancy? Different people have different sort of causes or beliefs on what the reasons are. I think most people are agreed that it was the election in 1987 that gave rise to militancy, the accord between the National Conference of the Congress, between my father and Rajiv Gandhi, Rahul's father, that shrunk the space for political opposition in Jammu and Kashmir. I, of course, would take the argument further and suggest that there have been various acts of omission and commission in the past, particularly in the way in which New Delhi handled the elected state government and the elected representatives of Jammu and Kashmir, that fed into this anger that finally boiled over in 1987 and gave rise to the militancy. But I mean, we can, I'm sure that this again will come up in the Q&A session. But that militancy has now been, as I said, going on for almost 30 years. And 30 years ago, if you had asked me that in 2018, do you believe you will still be talking about a violent Jammu and Kashmir where violence is still the rule rather than the exception, I wouldn't have believed it possible. Going by our experience in Punjab and elsewhere, I honestly would not have believed that 30 years later we'd still be talking about a violent Jammu and Kashmir, but lo and behold, we are. Now, in the course of this violence, so much has happened, and I think that brings me to the path that we have to take to try and address this problem. So, first and foremost, as I said, there are two dimensions to this problem, the internal and the external dimension. The external dimension involves Pakistan. We cannot ignore the fact that a significant part of the state of Jammu and Kashmir is with Pakistan. And nothing we have done since 1947 has changed that on the ground. Therefore, has the time come to ask ourselves that are we being overly ambitious, overly emotional when we talk about bringing that part of Jammu and Kashmir back into India? We haven't done it since 1947. Are we going to be able to do it now? And even with the gravest of provocation that we had in Kargil, when we fought a war in 1999, even there, the line of control, the sanctity of the line of control was respected by the Indian forces, in spite of the fact that we took losses on account of that. There were express instructions by the government of India that Indian planes and helicopters will not cross the line of control, that Indian troops will not cross the line of control. So imagine, with the provocation of Kargil, even at that time, if we decided to respect the sanctity of the line of control, haven't we somewhere or the other decided that yes, perhaps this is the way it is and we move forward from here? So one of the ways that we have to move forward is that we need to sit down with Pakistan and once and for all address this issue. Now, we can't do it with international mediation. I think mediation is a word that particularly people in India have a lot of suspicion about. But facilitation is not something we have a problem with. So perhaps friends in the right places can facilitate this process between India and Pakistan, try and address some of the suspicions that we have. I believe that we came incredibly close during the time of General Pervez Musharraf, first with Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and then with Dr. Manmohan Singh. But I think time ran out for us. Time ran out for us because it took us so long to finally put aside our suspicion of General Musharraf as the architect of the Kargil war, that by the time we realized he was somebody we could do business with, he wasn't nearly as powerful as we needed him to be. But even then, in terms of how far Pakistan moved away from its stated position, how different General Musharraf's four-point agenda was to previous formulations from Pakistan, has suggested that yes, there is scope for movement there. So that's the external part of the problem. The internal part of the problem is equally tricky. We need to look at restoring the autonomous position of Jammu and Kashmir to the fullest extent possible. Now, my party is one of those that has said that we need to take the clock back to the pre-53 position, which is the position that Jammu and Kashmir enjoyed at the time between accession and the arrest and dismissal of my grandfather's government. Now I hear, and I know this is a public forum, but I've said this in the past as well, I understand that that is sort of our beginning of the negotiation point. But I'm reasonable enough to understand that there have been changes that have been made that have been to the advantage of Jammu and Kashmir. So why would I roll back the applicability of the Supreme Court? Who would trust my elections if I conducted them for myself and then wonder? So the Election Commission of India, the Controller and Auditor General of India, the Supreme Court of India, various other things, perhaps those are something in the course of the give and take that will follow, are things that we will take off the table in the hope that New Delhi will respond in kind. And at the end of the day, we'll arrive at a workable model that to some extent restores Jammu and Kashmir's autonomous position, even if it doesn't take it all the way back to where we would like it to be. Clearly, Jammu and Kashmir has far too many troops and soldiers than we want. Now, again, please understand that Jammu and Kashmir has been the theatre of battle for almost every war that India has fought. Whether we fought with China, parts of Jammu and Kashmir have been involved. When all the wars that we have fought with Pakistan have been largely focused in Jammu and Kashmir. So regardless of whether there is militancy in Jammu and Kashmir or not, there will, so long as China and Pakistan are militarized, Jammu and Kashmir will have a military presence. But the hope is that that military presence will be as it was before 1989, which is on the borders, on the line of control, on the line of actual control, not settled into civilian areas, because that is where the problems arise. And again, I'm sure this is something that will come up in the course of the question-answer session, but there have been reports and incidents of grave human rights violations that haven't been adequately addressed, which again brings me to my next point. So while we're talking about reducing the footprint of security forces in the hinterland of Jammu and Kashmir, taking a fresh look at laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the impunity that that gives to security forces, we also need to look at a truth and reconciliation model for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And this can't just be confined to the Indian part of Jammu and Kashmir. It has to be made applicable to the side of Jammu and Kashmir on the Pakistani side as well. Because if people have died in the conflict of on our side, I dare say people have died in the conflict on the other side as well. If for the last 28 odd years you've had training camps that have been training militants in the Pakistani side of Jammu and Kashmir or in Pakistan proper, are you telling me that in these 28 years not a single death has taken place, even by natural causes, of those Kashmiris that have come there for training? And if they have, don't we have a right to answers as to what happened? So whether it is the incidents of human rights violations on the Indian side, whether it is the deaths in the training camps and elsewhere on the Pakistani side, whether it is the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits, what was behind that, whether it was the exodus along with the Kashmiri Pandits, you had some Kashmiri Sikhs and even Kashmiri Muslims that went, clearly there is a need to give some reconciliation to those people as well. So that has to be part of the way forward. We need to create economic opportunities for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We need to create the promise of a better future for youngsters who are today being drawn to pick up the gun. It's a very unusual situation that we have in Jammu and Kashmir today, where there are more youngsters willing to pick up the gun than there are actually guns available there. And that sentiment needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed both, as I said, politically, but it also needs to be addressed in terms of giving them opportunities in education, giving them opportunities in employment, and hopefully creating avenues and opportunities for them beyond the boundaries of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And what we on the Indian side need to do is to help rebuild the people's trust in institutions. That trust is sorely lacking. They don't have as much faith in the electoral system as I would like them to have. They don't have as much faith in the institutions of a functioning democracy as I would like them to have, be it in the police and its ability to carry out its work, in the courts and the court's ability to provide justice, or in the government of India's ability to just listen and be an honest broker in all this. So the way forward, the path forward, as I said, has to start from the dialogue process, both internally and externally. It has to take in all shades of opinion. It's no good. Government of India often hides behind this sort of fog screen that they create, where they turn around and say, well, first you Kashmiris all agree on something, and then we'll talk to you. Look, Kashmiris are not going to uniformly agree on any one thing. No matter what solution you work out, whether it's part of something similar to General Parvez Musharraf's 4-point program, whether it's drastically different from that, the fact is that you're not going to get 100% of the population to agree on anything. And therefore the aim has to be to bring in the majority of the population into whatever you agree. And that will only be possible if we involve in the dialogue process those people who at the moment we not only do we disagree with, but have kept away from that dialogue process. So if we can agree to start talking to each other, start listening to each other rather than talking at each other, we can start addressing some of these problems, we can actually genuinely go out and put into practice the words that we hear. I mean, if only Prime Minister Narendra Modi follows what he said on the 15th of August from the ramparts of the Red Fort the previous year, where he said that it's not bullets and abuses that will solve the Kashmir problem, it's embracing Kashmiris that will solve the problem. That's all you need to do. If you can once and for all understand that you cannot drive a solution to this problem out of the barrel of a gun. You can't shoot your way through a solution, you can't buy your way through a solution. You can only work your way to a solution if you embrace as many people as possible and bring them into this umbrella of the dialogue process. If you can do that, I believe we have the possibility of a path forward that will put this problem away for us once and for all. But if not, if all we're going to do is stopgap, piecemeal sort of stuff, a lot of good sounding words but very little implementation, then I dare say, and God forbid, that 20 or 30 years down the road from here, I'll probably no longer be around, but somebody will from Jammu and Kashmir. You'll probably be inviting them back here, and they'll still be talking about a violent, troubled, blood-soaked Jammu and Kashmir, and I think that will be a huge tragedy. So I don't believe that all opportunity has been lost, but we've squandered a lot of good chances, and I hope we don't do that going ahead. So that is as much as I'm going to say in the opening remarks, and I'm sure the rest will touch in the
do you think the act should be revoked, and how do you sort of respond to the
I've been a vocal critic of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and the sort of sense of impunity that it gives to security forces functioning there. In fact, during my term in office, we made a concerted effort to try and remove some parts of the state from the purview of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, but we were unsuccessful. Unfortunately, the forces against us, and when I say us, I mean the then Home Minister, who then subsequently became the Finance Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. He was one of my strongest allies in New Delhi for our need to whittle down and sort of water down the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, but we weren't able to. Now, I understand the point that you made about the heightened security force presence, but please understand, there is a clear sort of relationship between the onset of militancy and the heightened security force presence. The militancy wasn't a result of the security force presence. The security force presence is a result of militancy. You didn't hear of incidents of human rights violations, security force excesses and things like that before 1989. There were still troops in Jammu and Kashmir, but as I said earlier, they were on the border, they were on the line of control, they were on the line of actual control. They did their job there, they weren't in the hinterland. Unfortunately, their presence in the hinterland is as a result of the violence that is going on there. And I understand the concerns with regard to the human rights violations. I am one of the strongest critics on the mainstream political side when I think something has gone wrong, particularly if you take the incident last year when a legitimate voter in my own assembly constituency was tied to the front of an Indian Army jeep and paraded through villages as a signal to stone pelters that they shouldn't throw stones. And I believe the way the Indian Army has handled that has done a great disservice to what is otherwise a force that has, over the recent years, actually done a lot to improve its track record in Jammu and Kashmir. There is a lot that went wrong in the early 90s, and that's why I talked about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because I believe answers need to be given. What happened in 90, 91, 92 and onwards. There are a lot of unanswered questions that need to be addressed. But as much as some people would like to believe that independence is the magic solution for all of Kashmir's problems, it isn't. And like it or not, the people who advocate this independence very conveniently advocate it only for the Indian part of Jammu and Kashmir, very conveniently remaining silent about the part of Jammu and Kashmir that is with Pakistan's, that is under Pakistan's control. I have no problem with them advocating an independence for the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir. Why don't they free their side first? Lead by example. If you're such great votaries of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, if you're such great sympathizers for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, why have they made their part of Jammu and Kashmir an extension of China today? See, this is it. They won't have the guts to go and do this back home, but here suddenly they all become shame, and they think that by doing this suddenly the people of Jammu and Kashmir will wake up to their sympathy and their care. But the truth is that they have been responsible for the lion's share of the problem, the death and the destruction in Jammu and Kashmir, while being unable to do anything about the part of Jammu and Kashmir that they control. So,
From one contentious issue to another, let's talk about Article 370. Though from a political standpoint. Do you believe that political parties like the BJP, which have consistently campaigned on repealing Article 370, getting rid of it, will actually be able to achieve their goals? Should they drop their goal? Where do you stand on that?
well, obviously I'm a firm believer in the fact that Article 370 is the bedrock of Jammu and Kashmir's relationship with the rest of India. There are there's a lot of misunderstanding about Article 370. Now, most people here would believe that it is Article 370 that stops people from the rest of India owning property in Jammu and Kashmir, which is not true. Our state subject laws predate independence. State subject laws in Jammu and Kashmir are actually a product of the Maharaja in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And they were introduced primarily to protect the people of Jammu because they were worried that their lands would be bought up by rich Punjabi merchants and farmers, and Jammu and Kashmir would become an extended colony of rich Punjabis. Jammu and Kashmir state subject laws were neither introduced to protect Kashmiris, nor are they a product of Article 370. Article 370 simply cements the constitutional relationship between Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of the country. Now, by all means, if you want to revisit accession, if you want to revisit the terms of accession, then please revoke Article 370, recall the Constituent Assembly, and let's have that debate. But I don't think it's a debate that you want to have, and particularly in the current environment.
Do you think, in terms of the current environment, that the rise of the BJP in Jammu and Kashmir, then occupying, being a part of the government, has actually become a real threat to the stability of the region and sort of derail the long-run peace process?
Well, it hasn't added to the peace process at the moment. Like I said, we had a lot of expectations from Prime Minister Modi, particularly with those two steps that he took. But I think he flattered to deceive. As far as the BJP's presence in the state government is concerned, it hasn't been to the advantage of JNK. Today, JNK, Jammu and Kashmir, is more divided than it has ever been. It's divided on regional lines, but more than that, it's divided on religious lines. And those divisions have come to the fore in the case of the recent rape and murder of an 8-year-old girl in Kathua. The fact is that she was raped and murdered for no other reason than because people living in that area wanted to send out a message to the minority Muslim community. that they needed to vacate their lands. This is a product, unfortunately, of the divisive politics that the BJP has been playing, particularly in Jammu, to consolidate its own vote bank. I hope, though I'm not very optimistic, that better sense will prevail, because the closer we get to an election, I think the more we will see this sort of polarization, not less of it.
You stopped short of calling them a real threat. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I wouldn't like to call them a real threat, because at the end of the day, they are a mainstream political party. I'd like to believe that they are subject to the checks and balances of any political party that operates in a democratic environment. And that if they become, if what they do manifests itself into a real threat, then the people will take care of it at the next election. It's not for me to be handing out certificates like that.
Moving the discussion to another topic surrounding the debate of Kashmiri Pandits. Do you believe that the current environment, given all the internal disturbances that have been happening in Kashmir, actually do allow for the resettlement of Kashmiri Pandits in the region?
Well, it's not as conducive as it was a few years ago. That having been said, in spite of all the troubles that we have, and we still have Kashmiri Pandits living in Kashmir, I don't know of a single instance where a Kashmiri Pandit was targeted for being a Kashmiri Pandit. If anything, there is widespread belief amongst the people living in Kashmir that they would like to see Kashmiri Pandits come back. The problem is that between what the BJP would like to do and what the people in Jammu and Kashmir would like to see, what we would like to see is, to the best extent possible, Kashmiri Pandits coming back and assimilating themselves into the community. What the BJP would like to do is to create little enclaves, little encampments, almost like cantonments. And basically you're shifting them from one camp in Jammu to another camp in Kashmir, which will never work. The Kashmiri Pandits left because their sense of security was taken away from them. They felt unsafe. They felt that they wouldn't be able to survive in the sort of Kashmir that we saw in the early 90s. The only way they will come back is if we restore that sense of security to them. We haven't succeeded so far, but I do hope we will.
So, I know we go deeper into this in the audience Q&A, so shifting to the Indian political scenario, you probably get this question a lot where, dynastic politics and nepotism in politics is something talked about a lot in the Indian context. I guess it's particularly interesting because in Jammu and Kashmir, both you and your prime opponent, Ms. Mufti, come from a political family, and one of your key allies, historically, politically, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, is leading the Congress right now. Do you think that this culture inhibits young, talented outsiders from entering politics and succeeding in the field? And do you think there's a need to change this culture, and what would you do about that?
Well, it would be dishonest on my part to suggest that I would have been where I am if I didn't belong to a political family. It afforded me huge opportunities, and I took advantage of those opportunities. But as I've said in the past, and I'll continue to maintain, belonging to a political family gets your foot in the door a lot easier than it does for others, but it doesn't guarantee you success. The Indian voter, I guess like voters almost everywhere else, is a lot better informed today, is a lot more willing to experiment with their vote, and is not shy of affecting change using their vote if they're unhappy with the performance of their elected representative. Now, I've won elections, I've lost elections. I'm currently sitting in the opposition. If belonging to a political family was a guarantee of success, then I'd be here as Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, not as an opposition leader. Belonging to a political family gives you an opportunity. What you do with that opportunity is for you to. And to that extent, other things, there are similarities in other spheres as well. You look at the arts arena. An actor or an actress's son or daughter inevitably becomes an actor or an actress. Some succeed, some fail. The barometer of their success is the box office. Just belonging to a political family means that they'll get a few good offers with good directors to start with. But if they don't have the talent to carry a movie, you get 2 movies, 3 movies, 4 movies, after that, that's it, you're done. Same is true for sports persons. I mean, I don't want to name names because then it looks like I'm being personal. But we have had instances where cricketers' sons have become cricketers. Some have succeeded, some have failed. Business and so on and so forth. So for politics, yes, there is a dynastic politics, a facet to Indian politics, but it's not the be-all and end-all of politics. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of politicians in India. Because they don't belong to political families, you can't name them. But they're there. Not every single member of parliament of the Congress or other political parties belongs to a political dynasty. It's just that we get more than our fair share of attention, but it's also true we get more than our fair share of expectations. If Rahul Gandhi hadn't been a Gandhi and had been a regular Congress person, do you think he would have been subject to the amount of ridicule and criticism that he gets subjected to? That's the reality that we have to live with. But I mean, there's no point enjoying the advantages and then saying, look, I don't want to deal with the disadvantages. They both come as a package deal. So take it. But there's more than enough space for good, educated youngsters to join the political arena in India. And I think because of the advent of social media, a lot more of them are being noticed. I know of a number of people who have now become spokespersons of the Congress party. And I actually first saw them because they were active on Twitter, or they were active on Facebook and other social media platforms. So I think social media has become a great leveler in terms of removing barriers to entry into politics, and you'll see more of this going ahead.
So we'll do one last question before we move on to the audience question and answer session. So the 2019 elections are less than a year away, Mr. Abdullah. And following the elections in Uttar Pradesh, where suggested that the BJP securing a sweeping victory means that we should stop focusing on 2019 and start eyeing 2024. Do you think you would want to reevaluate your assessment?
No, because that tweet has been misquoted so many times that I actually wonder if I should have put it out there. What I said was, if things stay this way, then we might as well forget 2019 and start focusing on 2024. But clearly things haven't stayed that way. Recent by-poll in UP where the BJP lost two seats. The closeness of the election in Gujarat. The way in which the Congress seems to be re-emerging in Rajasthan. If they can get their own house in order in Madhya Pradesh, I dare say they'll give the BJP a good fight there as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. And I think in some ways Prime Minister Modi has helped the cause of the opposition with the demonetization and then the very shoddy implementation of GST. I'm not saying that the road to 2019 is going to be an easy one, but it certainly isn't all going in the BJP's favor. I think we need to tweak our strategy a bit, but I think we'll be able to take the fight to the BJP and the NDA.
So what would you do if you were in Rahul Gandhi's job right now?
Thank goodness I'm not.
We can now move on to audience question and answer sessions. Rama will be going around with the mic.
I would have student questions first.
You mentioned that it might be in India's best interest to accept the line of control as the international border. Do you feel that it would hinder national security giving in so easily, because it would lead other countries to believe that only if they could invade a certain part of India, it would be under their possession and then India would back down?
I don't think we have any neighbors that are really going to do that. The only one we have is China, and let's be honest, if they wanted to do it, they could do it, and there's very little we would have been able to do about that. You said we would agreeing the solution on the line of control be giving in too easily. How many years has it been since we held this position? It's not something that we decided yesterday. We've sort of talked about reunifying Jammu and Kashmir right since 1947 onwards. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the early 1990s, Parliament passed a resolution authorizing the government of India to do everything it has to bring back the part of Jammu and Kashmir that's with Pakistan. What have we done after that? Unfortunately, the problem has persisted, and no realistic solution has presented itself. So no, I don't think we'll be giving in too easily. And at the end of the day, what is the price to be paid for peace with your neighbor on the western frontier? How many soldiers do we lose as a regular feature just because we're manning the border? How much money are we pumping into a defense infrastructure that perhaps we'll be able to downsize then and use that money for better purposes? So I don't believe we're giving in too easily, but this will be a part of a comprehensive solution that will include a whole lot of other areas as well. It's not going to be a singular decision just on the line of control, and we leave all other problems mainstream.
Well, Mr. Abdullah, thank you for speaking. My question was about creating economic opportunities. You spoke that was one of the potential solutions for decreasing violence in the region. But you also spoke about returning state power to pre-1953 levels. So I wanted to know what ideas you had if Jammu and Kashmir had state powers at pre-1953 levels, how they would be able to increase economic opportunity.
Well, in two areas, obviously it would afford us an advantage. It would give us an ability to frame a tax policy different from the rest of the states, which would then allow us to incentivize investment into Jammu and Kashmir greater than we've been able to do so far. I think it would also allow us to affect changes to labor laws and make Jammu and Kashmir a friendlier place for manufacturing and industry. But I don't think Jammu and Kashmir's economic problems are going to be solved by investment into manufacturing and industry. Because for one, we don't have the raw material base to make manufacturing on a large scale attractive, and the market isn't large enough. So basically, to manufacture in Jammu and Kashmir almost any product, you would have to transport raw material in only to transport the finished product out, which inherently makes that sort of an industry unviable. The one area that Jammu and Kashmir has available to it for investment is in hydroelectricity generation. And that's an area that, whether we have an autonomous Jammu and Kashmir or not, is one that I'd like to see greater focus and greater attention paid to. Because I think we have a capacity of almost 18,000 megawatts of run-of-the-river electricity out of our rivers. And if we can harness that and sell that electricity in the rest of the country, I think that would go a long way towards improving the economic position of Jammu and Kashmir.
So on that point, some people say that lack of economic opportunity is what is fueling the distress within the people of Kashmir right now. What do you say to that?
Well, the facts don't bear that out. The sort of people you find involved in militancy today are not youngsters who don't have an opportunity. You have PhD students who are today leaving their studies and picking up the gun. You have youngsters who've done a double MA in various subjects, who would inevitably have been able to find gainful employment somewhere, that are picking up the gun. So people who are equipping themselves with weapons today are not sort of those who dropped out of school after the 8th standard and don't see a future for themselves. Tragically, some of those who are picking up the gun today actually would have had a very bright future. But for political and, as I said, increasingly religious reasons, are taking the path of violent resistance rather than any other.
To get rid of people like you do?
You spoke about, in your opening remarks, how given our distrust of Musharraf, by the time we were able to get over it, he wasn't in the power we wanted him to be for a reconciliation or a solution to the problem. Do you think we'll ever get a Pakistani Prime Minister in that sort of sense? Because given the political influence of Pakistan's military, everything that's going on right now with Nawaz Sharif, the judiciary, the media, would we ever have a Prime Minister powerful enough to have a proper set discussion?
Look, it's not for us to tell Pakistan what sort of leadership it should have. As it's not Pakistan's place to tell India what sort of government they should elect. One hopes that at some point the influence that the Pakistani military is able to bring to the office of Pakistan Prime Minister will reduce to the point where you will have an empowered Prime Minister in Pakistan. I think one of the reasons why we were able to come as close to a solution with General Musharraf is because he wasn't an elected Prime Minister. He was a dictator. He usurped all the powers of the legislature, the powers of the executive, and to a large extent, the powers of the judiciary. I think it was finally him trying to usurp more of the powers of the judiciary that did him in. Yes, I mean, he was a single focus of power in Pakistan. Will they have a prime minister with that kind of power? I don't know. That's like you asking me to predict, will we have a prime minister in India that will have more power than Prime Minister Modi has right now? I don't know. Please also understand that both the prime ministers that actually took this dialogue forward with Pakistan were prime ministers of coalition governments, which are inherently unstable and notoriously weak. It's a strong government that hasn't been able to take this dialogue process forward. So sometimes it's not the office, it's the individual and what they do with that office. So who knows? I guess we have to be hopeful.
Very good evening, Mr. Abdullah. I'm Sumail Bopra and I'm pursuing my master's in law at Berkeley. My question is with regard to the 2019 election and as a member of opposition, what is your plan and the blueprint to fight the BJP? I would like to comment that in 2014, it's part of the question. In 2014, the BJP ran a campaign which was based on anti-corruption and anti-elite. That was the flavor of that time. The present flavor is communalism. And we have to agree that 70% of the majority is Hindu. And whenever you talk about development, unemployment, like you see in Gujarat election, Mr. Modi changes the narrative and starts an insidious plot.
Sure, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Look, most of the opposition parties, if not all of them, will be unable to play on the communal stage of the BJP's politics, and nor should they. I think there are two areas in which the BJP has a huge advantage over other political parties. One is when you play the national security card, because they're deemed to be far more hawkish on India's national security issues than other parties are. And the other is the Hindutva card, the secular versus the communal. This again is an argument that parties like the Congress and others can't win. But I think there is a lot more that is wrong with India that simply a communal campaign will not wash away. The deep distress in the agricultural community, the slowdown in manufacturing, the inability to create jobs, the inability of the Prime Minister to fulfill some of his commitments from his 2014 election speeches, like bringing back all the black money that is stashed away in foreign banks and stuff like that. So I think if we fight the election using our minds and our hearts, rather than just fighting an emotional campaign, I think there is a lot that we can bring to the fore to put the BJP on the defensive. But yes, the point you made about sort of stirring communal passions, one hears that back home as well. The fact that an effort will be made to derive a favorable judgment in the Ram Mandir Babri Masjid issue, which again will play into the BJP's hands in the run-up to 2019. These are all real issues that we'll have to grapple with. But if I had to work out a strategy, which I don't have to. I mean, I belong to a very small regional party. At best, we fight 6 parliament seats, even if I fight all of them. So, believe me, Rahul Gandhi and other opposition parties aren't going to be calling me up and asking me, Omar Abdullah, what do you think we should do? But since you asked me, I have told you.
Please go ahead.
Can you please talk about why you think that the Pakistani Kashmir has not been in the news in the media for such violent reasons as has been the Indian Kashmir, and why do you think that it has merged with the Pakistani state in a much better political and cultural way than has been the Indian Kashmir?
I can't comment on whether the Pakistani Kashmir is better off culturally or economically, because what I will tell you is hearsay. I hear that it's not as economically well off as our part of Jammu and Kashmir, in spite of the militancy that we've had to deal with. I understand that you don't have the sort of infrastructure we have in the healthcare, education sector, etc., in your side of Jammu and Kashmir. I'm sorry, I'm making an assumption and I shouldn't. But on the Pakistani side of Jammu and Kashmir, as opposed to the Indian side, I think the fact that there is a concerted effort to, so much of what has happened in the Pakistani side of Jammu and Kashmir is Chinese charity. A lot of the infrastructure projects that have been built there have been built on Chinese handouts. Nothing that has been built on the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir has come from charity. Whatever has been built there, good, bad, less, more, has come from Indian investment into Jammu and Kashmir. Now, why doesn't the Pakistani side of Jammu and Kashmir see the sort of violence that the Indian side sees? I think because Pakistan is fortunate to have India as its neighbor, as opposed to India, which has Pakistan as its neighbor. India has not made a concerted effort to create and foment trouble on the Pakistani part of Jammu and Kashmir. Unfortunately, that favor wasn't returned to India. So if Pakistan was a neighbor more like India is, I think Jammu and Kashmir would be in a far more peaceful place.
Mr. Abdullah, you kind of alluded to this in your speech, where you talked about the internal conflict that has been more prevalent since the past few months, perhaps weeks. So what exactly do you think should be the approach of the Indian government in addressing this? Because the fact is, a lot of these militants who hold the weapons, they neither want to protect their allegiance to the Indian state nor the Pakistani state, where the main argument is that because of the growing power struggle of land, of prestige between these two nations, Kashmir hasn't seen the light of day. So you mentioned about a dialogue between the Indian government and them, but dialogue in what form and with which group?
Well, there are multiple groups. It's not as simple as in some other places where you have a single or a couple of armed groups. And let's be honest, some of the armed groups aren't going to come forward to talk. That part of the problem will have to be handled in the dialogue with Pakistan. Because at the end of the day, their support and allegiance comes from that side. But what can government of India do? Quite simply stop living in denial. More often than not, you'll hear responsible voices in New Delhi saying about Kashmir, there's no problem. There is no need for a political solution. There is no political problem in Kashmir. It's a handful of misguided youngsters and they will soon be sorted out. You have the announcement of military operations called Operation All Out, and you believe that by use of force you will drive a solution to this problem. That's not going to happen. Like it or not, the excessive use of force is actually counterproductive. And as I mentioned earlier, this new dimension to the problem where you now find youngsters who are picking up the gun not because they want to drive a political solution to the problem, but because they identify with the religious dimension to what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. That's of far greater cause, because of far greater worry to me, because a dialogue can drive a political solution. You might want full independence, I might want full merger, and by talking to each other we'll arrive at a solution that you and I can both live with. When the reason for your struggle is religious, and the solution that I have is political, how do we find common ground? And unless we can address this slide now and address the political problem, while the majority of the people fighting in Jammu and Kashmir identify themselves with the politics, we are fine. The moment the scales are tilted in the other direction, and the majority of the people fighting in Jammu and Kashmir are doing it for religious reasons, then no political solution will work. Then I don't know what to do. As I said, we've lost a lot of good opportunities in the past. I hope we're not blind to the depths of the challenge that we face now.
So, moderator, I'm going to get a chance to speak. I'm going to ask you that.
It's random. It's random. It's like I'm not.
I was the first person to raise my hand.
I'm sorry. We'll try to come back to you later. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Abdullah, I have a question to ask you. It's regarding what you spoke about informed voters, right? You spoke about how India is having more informed voters today, and that's what's going to create a better government because they decide whom to choose, and they're probably taking risks with their votes now. In Kashmir, schools are being burnt down. Students are not allowed to be educated, and that affects their decision as far as voting is concerned. Beyond that, Kashmir University Student Union has constantly been strangulated in some form, and their voices have been crumpled. So, how do you think students, when their rights and their voices are being curbed, will ever be able to take the right decision and vote correctly?
Well, I take exception to your view that to be an informed voter, you have to be educated. Because I mean, the point you made is that because children's education is affected by the conflict, and because schools are burnt, they will grow into people or voters that are ill-informed and unable to tell what is good for them. Some of the most well-informed voters that I have come across are actually some of the least educated people in terms of formal education. So I don't believe that you need to be a highly educated voter to be an informed voter. And again, looking at some of the people who blindly follow the BJP, some of the most well-educated people are also some of the blindest voters in that regard. So that aside, now I understand the point that you made about Kashmir University and well, let me say one thing. I don't think Kashmir University students' voices are being strangled. Yes, the government of the day and successive governments have taken the view that to organize student union election processes are perhaps counterproductive for the well-being of the university. But believe me, and I know this from experience, I don't know, have you ever been to Kashmir University? No. Okay, so then I have a slight advantage over you. I've been to Kashmir University and I know Kashmir University students are not shy of expressing their point of view. Even if it's in the form of civil disobedience by not standing when the Indian national anthem is played. Believe me, they make themselves heard in terms of what their political views are. And that much space is given to them. So long as the protest that they are undertaking is a peaceful one, it's not designed to incite law and order disturbances or violence, I think governments have given them a fair amount of space within which to operate.
Omar, I'm a Kashmiri and a proud Kashmiri, but I still prefer to be in States because of obvious reasons. I would talk back home every single day, and my family has a question that when can I be back home? But they always fail to motivate and give me a solid reason to be back home. Since you're here today, can you give me one big reason that I can be back and live there forever?
No, because that reason has to come from you. I have my reasons for why I live in Kashmir. And like you, I could live anywhere. I was born in England, I have a right of abode for the United Kingdom stamped in my passport. I'm reasonably well educated, I'm reasonably comfortable with the English language, and I could live pretty much anywhere and do pretty much anything. But I've chosen to do what I do in Jammu and Kashmir. And I didn't ask anybody else to give me a reason to do that. It's something I wanted to do, and I did. So therefore, don't look to me or your family for a reason to come back. That reason has to come from within you. Maybe one day you'll find your calling, you'll find a reason to go back, whether it's to contribute to the state economically, whether it's to contribute to the state politically, and I'm not talking about which side of the political equation. You may find yourself attracted to the non-mainstream side of the political equation. You may find yourself attracted to an economic model that is far from what is being carried out in Jammu and Kashmir. But my limited point, and that's why I started my answer with a no, is that why you should go back to Kashmir and why you should live there permanently is something only you can tell yourself. And I truly hope that you do find your reason, because we'd like people like you to come back. And the sooner the better, but that is for you to decide.
Thanks, Omar, for coming here. And a lot of us are your fans from the speech you gave in the Lok Sabha, which was probably one of your best speeches.
It's the only one that everyone remembers. And it's actually a little daunting and scary in parts that possibly my best work is behind me. And
we certainly hope that's not the case.
Well, I mean, we can discuss this some other time, but the fact is that the circumstances were created for that speech to be seen and heard by so many people. I wonder whether, unless I address the United Nations General Assembly, I wonder whether those sort of circumstances will be created again. But besides, I mean, that's neither here nor there. Sorry, your question.
So you unassumingly said that Rahul Gandhi is probably not going to call you to ask about strategy, but we know that you share a very good rapport with him, and in some ways are very good friends with him as well, right? So my question was, how do you see him? How have you seen him evolve in the last 4 years, especially after taking over as the Congress president and now leading from the front at different state elections?
Well, you guys have a lot to answer for that. I mean, we sent one version of Rahul Gandhi to Berkeley, and you sent us a completely different version. I was very, this is completely tongue-in-cheek and very flippant, but take it as you will. I was telling my hosts, I think it was yesterday, that every time we visit officially as ministers, we would visit South Africa, the South Africans would tell us that you sent us Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and we sent you back the Mahatma. Now, I'm not for a moment equating Rahul Gandhi with Mahatma Gandhi, but the truth is that we sent you one version of Rahul Gandhi and you sent us back a very new, very confident, very assertive, very outgoing, and a very engaged Rahul Gandhi. So thank you, Berkeley. What else can I say? How have I seen him evolve? Look, everybody changes. If you had asked me to do this interaction with you 8-10 years ago, I've got a few years under my belt now in terms of political experience. I've been doing this for 20 years, which is a little longer than Rahul has. I think a few years ago, I wouldn't have been as engaging as I am now. I am very similar to Rahul, a lot more insular. I'm not a very outgoing, gregarious sort of person. I'm quite happy in my own company, like a lot of other politicians. So it takes a while to grow into these sort of interactions. That's, I think, the biggest change that I've seen in him. He's a lot more willing to engage. I think he has the advantage of not being part of a government, so it's a lot easier to be a politician in opposition than it is to be a politician in government. Because in opposition, all you have to do is criticize. You don't have to deliver anything. In government, it's a lot more difficult. So I think that's obviously a crucial change that has come about. In terms of how he will evolve further, I think 2019 will be a key indicator of that. But like I said, Berkeley has a lot to answer for, and I think there are a lot of people in the BJP who will not be happy with your university.
Thank you. This will be the last question. Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, and for your pro-Indian speech. My question is about religion. So I have been following BJP a lot, and BJP usually accuses Congress and its opposition parties of putting religion into this. And a lot, even Congress accuses BJP of putting religion into this, into politics basically. And the people of India are getting more educated. And so the influence of religion seems to have declined. But where is the new insurgence of religion coming into the Indian political scenario?
You truly believe that the influence of religion in politics has declined? You do. Well, I think that's a point on which you and I will have to agree to disagree. Because as a functioning politician in a state where a lot of my constituencies are almost split down the middle between Hindu population and Muslim population, I can tell you that I have never seen a more polarized environment than I am seeing today. And this is from experience. I dare say the same is replicated in other parts of the country as well. So, I mean, you believe that it is far less. I believe that it is a lot more. And as I said, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that.
This is Berkeley for God's sake. This is not here.
Yes.
This is Berkeley.
I understand.
And free speech. Come on, guys. Berkeley. I gave up my work today to be here. Let me ask one question, guys. This is Berkeley. Me too. Come on. I've been beaten up in Kashmir for 30 years. This is Berkeley for God's sake. I'm in the United States. I'm a US citizen. I'm not a subject of Jammu and Kashmir. When we said about these guys become shared here, we are shared here because this is a free country. We're not in a militarized zone anymore. I need to ask a question. I need that, please. I'm begging you. I need to ask a question.
I'm sorry, we can't make exceptions. Sorry.
Look, honestly, there's nothing that he can ask me that I haven't been asked before.
Okay, let me ask this question. Let me ask
I
a
mean,
question. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Mr. Omar Abdullah.
So, Mr. Omar Abdullah, my name is
Please repeat the question.
I live in San Ramon, California. I grew up in Kashmir. I was born in downtown Kashmir, raised in Kashmir. So, I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you can please, because you said there's nothing.
A question, because we're not in an interview.
Sunle, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to basically establish, because what you're telling these people here, they don't know. They have not been through that. They have not lived the life I have lived. Okay? So, starting from when I was growing up in 1970, starting from your grandfather, the slogan of the day was, Allah karega, Wangan karega, Sher karega. Allah and Wangan is vegetables in Kashmiri. So what we were told is that, hey, even if you are eating vegetables, it's okay. This is Sher Kashmir. Listen to him. He's the God. And we did that. The guy pulled the biggest betrayal in the history of Kashmir. He signed the pact with... Yes, there's a question. How do you justify that? That's your grandfather. Coming back to your father. Okay, no, I have to. Okay, the only credibility qualification his father has, because he's the son of Sheikh Abdullah. 1987, Mr. Abdullah touched on an election. Okay, what he did not say is that there was one guy, Muhammad Yusuf Shah, who fought election from Umirapur constituency against Muhyiddin Shah, who's his relative. And his father and his government rigged the election. This Muhammad Yusuf Shah became Sayyid Salahuddin, the chief of Muslim Mujahideen. Okay, he must speak.
No, because the news will become that I silenced him. Let him speak. I told you, there's nothing he's saying that I haven't heard before.
Okay, let me speak. Yes, 20 years I have been on the church. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So, coming back to his tenure as a chief minister, 200 civilians were killed, Mr. Abdullah, while you were watching. You ran on the promise of restoring autonomy, getting rid of ASPA, nothing happened. You broke your promises to Kashmir, and when Burhan Wani dies, millions of people are on his funeral. What do you call them, terrorists? That is the sentiment of Kashmir. When your grandfather passed away, 1.4 million people showed up for his funeral. Today, you have armed guards at his grave because somebody might dig him out. Okay, so you have to understand, what is the sentiment? You are either with us, you are or with them. Your family has dragged Kashmir to the gates of hell. Sheikh Khan, how do you sleep at night?
Thank you.
How do you guys have blood on your hands?
Thank you.
You and Mufti and everybody else.
Thank you.
Very small question, sir. Like as a gentleman said, he's a proud Kashmiri. I am a proud JNK citizen. Not a citizen, but a state subject. I'm from Jammu. I have a question for you. Very simple question. I'm from Jammu. And can I ask you?
I think that's enough.
I'm from Jammu, and I have a question for you. The whole session was about Kashmir and going forward. You haven't mentioned. I'm a bit sad and disappointed by the entire session that not a single word has been uttered about the aspiration of the Jammu people.
See, therein lies the problem. You see Jammu as independent.
No,
you pull out the transcript of what I have said. When I talked about the state, I talked about the state of Jammu and Kashmir. I have always talked about Jammu and Kashmir. Even in this talk, I've been very careful to talk about Jammu and Kashmir. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, whether it's an aspiration for peace, whether it's an aspiration for development, whether it's an aspiration for political space, The aspirations of Jammu are not different.
Not for the young man from the Jammu actually. You talked about a free country.
You had your question. See, look. Either this is a question and answer session, or it's a session for you to express your point of view. Now the gentleman who stood up said a lot. There wasn't a single question. He wanted his space to speak. He got his space. He said what he had to. He passed judgment. We're done. Now move on.
Let the woman speak in this room now. Is that
Berkeley, this is not Kashmir, this is not Gupta Road. He's not a dictator here.
May I have a bad mic?
To help with Sher Bakra. They destroyed Kashmir.
Thank you so much everyone for coming here. I really appreciate it. Thank you Mr. Abdullah.